Welcome to your virtual medicinal native plant walk. My name is Holly Hawthorn, and I am a clinical herbalist in Southern Oregon. I'm excited to be able to share my love for these mountains that we call home. I've called the Rogue Valley my home for about 14 years now and have spent countless hours roaming these woods, studying the plants, the trees, and other critters. Whenever I feel a sense of weariness from the challenges of the great world, I know if I head out deep into these mountains, something calms inside of me. We all have our spots in the monument and in the other local mountain ranges that we probably like to visit. I have enjoyed rooting into this land and watching some of my tree friends change and grow and stanza plants move from year to year to spots more advantageous for themselves. I love getting so deep into the woods that all technology, other people, and the busyness of traffic fade away from the senses. These are the big wild spaces that have captured my attention in Southern Oregon. So as I've immersed myself into the study of herbalism, I'm happy to share this knowledge with you. I am by no means an expert in botany or plant taxonomy, but I could speak to some of the medicinal properties of the common plants we come across in these mountains. I've had the luck of having some amazing field botany teachers since I've lived here. And like any respectable plant nerd, probably much like yourselves, my reference library keeps growing with every year. But ultimately, my best teacher is that of the plants and trees themselves, slowing down just enough to listen to the message they want to share. So to kick off this class, I would like to start with a poem from the book of poetry, Cascade-Siskiyou Poems, by our local naturalist, Pepper Trail. This poem is called Ponderosa. The tree is a library, a tight rolled scroll, layers of scribbled sheets pressed together, guarding their truths against rain and fire. Each season, life writes a new report, records with incised letters and furrowed lines, selections from the infinite world of incident. At the foot of the tree, a pile of torn pages, puzzle-shaped scraps no two alike, their traces embossed on the remaining text. Illiterate, I spread my hand across the bark, must content myself with the beauty of the book, the magic contained in the words unread. Dutch Oven Creek. Here in Southern Oregon, we live in an interesting intersection of time, space, and cultural significance. In this zone, the mighty Klamath Mountains, which intersect the Pacific Coastal Range to the west and east to the Southern Cascade Mountains and south to the Sierras. The Siskiyou Mountains are a subrange of the Klamath Mountains and provide a biodiversity bridge between these bioregions. Mount Ashland is the highest peak of the Siskiyou Mountains. Mount Ashland is part of the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest. Mount Ashland and Siskiyou Peak are both above 6,800 feet in elevation and support a subalpine flora, conifers, chaparral, wet and dry meadows, and open glades. The land found within this bioregion has been the traditional land of the Takelmas, the Athapaskans, the Shastans, and the Klamath peoples. The native tribes of this region have been stewards of their land since time immemorial. Many traditional ecological knowledge practices, such as agroforestry, burning, horticulture, are rooted in these people's stewardship based on sacred ceremony and living respectfully with their environment. This has encompassed stewardship over wildlife habitat, fire potential, vegetation, hydrology, and fisheries. All of the plants and vegetation we see today in this region have been affected by some long-term human habitation and land and forest management. Therefore, in this class, when I'm discussing the medicinal use of certain plants, I will be drawing on a host of data that is pulled from ethnobotanical usage of this area, cited, and I will also be pulling from other indigenous groups of the Pacific Northwest and other regions, scientific studies of certain plants and their constituents. The Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest is a United States national forest that spans across the states of Oregon and California. It was formed in 2004 by combining the formerly separate Rogue River and Siskiyou National Forests. Mount Ashland is a unique ecosystem of biodiversity linking the Klamath Mountains to the coastal range to the west and east to the southern Cascades, forming what we refer to as the Siskiyou Crest. The Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument was established in the year 2000 by President Clinton. In May of 2015, 70 scientists endorsed the April 2011 Cascade-Siskiyou Scientific Report and the need for monument expansion, bringing the total number of scientists speaking out for expansion to 85. In 2016, it was expanded over 114,000 acres of land. President Obama then expanded the monument by another 48,000 acres. Some of the unique natural features in the monument include Pilot Rock, which is a volcanic neck and interior of an extinct volcano with its columnar basalt cliff faces and dramatic views. The towering 9,493 feet of Mount McLaughlin as a landmark on the horizon from every angle of the monument. The epic views of Soda Mountain, the interesting geology of Hobart Bluff, and the wildflower meadows of Grizzly Peak. All are included in this area. The Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument is the first U.S. national monument set aside solely for the preservation of biodiversity, as one of the most diverse ecosystems found in the Cascade Range. 200 species of birds are known to exist in the monument, including some threatened and endangered species. But most notable to us, the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument is noted for its significant botanical diversity. Threats to the existence and protection of the Cascade-Siskiyous include boundary adjustments, road building, logging, some of which is sanctioned by the BLM, and grazing. There are 3 distinct ecoregions converging in the monument. The biodiversity includes grassland and shrubland, Gary and California oak woodlands, juniper scablands, and mixed conifer and white fir forests, and wet meadows and riparian forests. In the Klamath Mountains, it has said to be one of the most extensive temperate plant communities in the world, with over 3,500 taxa of vascular plants. According to Michael Kaufman in his book, The Klamath Mountains, A Natural History, North America is home to 2 of the most species-rich temperate forests in the world, the Southern Appalachian Mountains and the Klamath Mountains. The reason he explains why this is that during the Cenozoic period, the glaciers and oceans did not completely cover these mountains. Therefore, they served as a haven for plants and animals. These conditions created one of the most species-diverse floral regions of Earth. So when I'm planning for a plant walk, I like to try to take into consideration what plants we're going to see at the moment in time at that location, finding botanical and medicinal themes that tie those plants together in somewhat cohesive way. We might look at the commonalities of plant families with their similarities of structure. We will probably dive into the patterns in form and function, as well as the common medicinal constituents of plant families and their related species. I had to do a process of elimination when preparing for this virtual plant walk, as that in this format, we have access to all of the medicinal plants throughout the seasons. So I ended up choosing the most common medicinal plants that you will routinely see, that have the most data regarding their phytochemistry and traditional and contemporary uses in herbalism. This class is not a class in how to key out a plant. nor is it a class on how to harvest a plant correctly, nor is it an in-depth class into all the aspects of each of these plants or medicine making. Also, the discussion of these plants in this class is not treatment recommendations or specific protocols. This class is meant to be an introduction to the world of medicinal plants, touching on some fun facts about each plant. My hope is that it will serve as a launching point for more discovery into topics that you might find interesting or intriguing. So to begin, we're going to start with the Rosaceae family, the rose family. And we're looking at plant family common characteristics. The Rosaceae family is characterized by it being herbaceous or woody, alternate serrate leaves with stipules. The flowers have 5 usually rounded petals and sepals with numerous stamens and a hypanthium. The main active constituents of these plants are tannins, flavonoids, triterpenes, and phenolic acids. What this tells us the common actions would be are astringent, vulnerary, meaning wound healing, tissue tonic, nutrient, cardiotonic, antioxidant, both topical and internal, and laxative. Here are some examples of Rosaceae plants. So as I begin to go through all the plants, I will be just discussing them with their common names. Their scientific names are listed on each slide, and at the end of the presentation, there will be a plant species list to refer back to. So first, ocean spray. Tips for identification is that it grows up to 10 feet, and its new stem growth is a red-gray color. Like all Rosaceae family plants, it has 5 petaled flowers and 5 sepals. In this case, they are in terminal clusters. The bark and leaves of this plant are astringent, and they have been used to stop bleeding, tone tissue, as well as be diuretic. It has historical uses of supporting diarrhea and toning the uterus after birth. The second plant is bald hip rose. One can identify this plant by its shallow rhizomatous root system. It grows 1 to 5 feet tall, has alternating compound leaves, double-toothed elliptical egg-shaped leaves. The rose hip is part of the hypanthium, which is the cup structure fused at the base of the calyx and corolla that encases the seeds. However, the rose hip that forms in the fall of these plants are very, very tiny. I personally have used these flowers to make a lovely rose elixir, which I tinctured and added rose-infused honey to, which I found to be supportive of both the physical and emotional heart. Historically, this plant has been used for weepy or boggy inflammatory conditions, as well as healthy relational boundaries and grief and loss. The rose petals in general are higher in gallic acid, which is a type of tannin that has been shown to play an important role in the inhibition of malignant transformation of cells, cancer development, and inflammation. The molecular mechanism of gallic acid in inflammatory diseases is still unclear. Another type of tannin has been shown to modulate intestinal bacterial growth, similar to prebiotics. The rose hips in general have been shown to have high flavonoid content from the seed and fruit, processing antioxidant, antimicrobial activity, especially certain flavonoids, which are cancer preventative and anti-inflammatory. The next plant is woodland strawberry. The leaves of this plant have been high in levels of vitamin C, and the leaves make a real pleasant tea as a more mild alternative to raspberry leaf. The slight astringency can be helpful tissue tonic after birth, and the plant has historically been used for UTIs, to lower stomach acidity, a gargle for sore throats, a wash for wounds, eczema, and sunburn. And lastly, thimbleberry. This native berry plant has 5 lobe serrated alternate leaves that are slightly wider than longer, with, of course, 5-petaled flowers. If you've never experienced thimbleberry, the thimble-shaped berries are not super robust, but can provide a burst of sweetness when on a walk through the woods. It has all of the same medicinal properties as strawberry and red raspberry, in addition to being a nice gargle for sore throats, inflamed gums, and mouth sores. When I find that there is a short window moment right before the flowers are in bloom, when the plant releases a bunch of its triterpenes and the fragrance is incredibly intoxicating. So if you come across a patch of thimbleberry and its flowers have not bloomed just yet, don't be afraid to stick your face into the plant and take a nice big whiff, as that you might be met with a glorious sweet smell. Okay, as seen in this slide, the Asteraceae or daisy family are characterized as being herbaceous, flowers with composite heads of ray and disc flowers with layers of bracts under the flower heads, and are very aromatic. The aromatic molecules are due to its volatile oil, but these plants are generally rich in sesquiterpene lactones, iridoids, and oligosaccharides. This tells us that these plants are bitter in flavor and action, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, antispasmodic, and prebiotic. Here are some examples of Asteraceae plants. The first being yarrow. Yarrow is a common plant in most herbalist apothecaries. It has rhizomes that spread to form clumps of feathery aromatic leaves. It can be identified by its umbel, made up of numerous composite flowers. There are several whorls of overlapping bracts that cup each flower head, made up of 3 to 12 usually white ray flowers and 10 to 75 pale yellow to cream colored disc flowers. It's best to harvest the flowers before they are pollinated, which you can tell by the little yellow to orange dot in the center of each flower. For the most potent medicine, we like to harvest the flower just before or just as the flowers are opening, and we use the entire aerial parts of the plant. The feathery leaves can be dried and made into a powder to pack into clean wounds to staunch bleeding and assist in wound healing, making this plant a great addition to an herbalist first aid kit. This is aided by its antimicrobial properties. However, in a bind, just smashing up or chewing up some of the aerial parts of the plant and placing it on a wound as a poultice can stop bleeding very quickly. The aromatic flowers or leaf of the flower in hot tea can help promote sweating to drive out infection. The yarrow leaves also move stagnant blood when taken internally, which is helpful for stagnant menses when clotting is present, which is why it needs to be used with extreme caution or avoided during pregnancy. However, on the flip side, it has been shown to be helpful with too much menstrual bleeding. An oil infused with the dried leaf can be applied to help resolve bruising. Energetically, it's been said that a small dose of yarrow tincture can help someone with lax boundaries and feel more grounded in their body. As a cold tea, it can act as a diuretic. It has a historical use of being used for arthritis, as that it is anti-inflammatory, and it also increases circulation. This is primarily due to its phenolic or polyphenol constituents, as well as its sesquiterpene. The uses of this plant, based on the phytochemistry and very show that yarrow is hepatoprotective, protective of the liver function, vasodilatory, it dilates blood vessels, and anxiolytic, anti-anxiety. Yarrow is often used in combination with hawthorn, linden, cramp bark, and for cases of hypertension. It is often combined with cayenne and ginger to be used as a topical circulation stimulant. And to help with increased swelling, it has been combined with peppermint and boneset. Yarrow, with all plants from the Asteraceae family, need to be used with caution if there's a suspected aster allergy. The next plant we're going to talk about is Alice Eastwood's fleabane. Although I have not found any documentation regarding the medicinal use of fleabane, this fleabane species specifically, other related species of fleabane are known to have constituents of flavonoid tannins, especially the gallic acid, and volatile oils such as limonene. They have been historically collected in flower to be used as a tincture and topical liniment. The herbal actions of this plant are antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, diuretic, and astringent. Therefore, it has been indicated for use with coughs with lots of mucus, diarrhea, and excessive bleeding. The herbalist Matthew Wood states that another similar fleabane species stimulates the kidneys and kidney function. And the last plant we're going to talk about on this slide is arrowleaf balsam root. It is identified by its large multi-crown yellow disc and ray flowers. Its roots are massive with a cork-like root bark full of aromatic resin and a more soft, pithy center. According to the herbalist Michael Moore, the root is at its most aromatic in the springtime. It has been said that the large taproot can grow up to 8 feet long, and it has been estimated that it can live 40 to 80 years old. It has been described medicinally as a combination of echinacea and osha. A root tincture in hot water can promote mucus secretions and soothe irritated tissues and clear mucus from the lungs. It can stimulate white blood cells, therefore it's an excellent but more mild immune stimulant. It can be decocted as a tea and added to honey to make a great sore throat syrup. The leaves and aerial parts have historically been used in wound healing salves akin to arnica. Because these plants are slow growing, it's best to avoid the larger specimens and harvest from the small offshoots of this plant. So next we come to the Lamiaceae family, the mint family. There's more variation in the Lamiaceae family medicinally. However, they are generally, but not always, quite aromatic, meaning they have high volatile oil content. This indicates an antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic, and carminative action. Remember, carminative action means prevent gassiness. The secondary metabolite, or the active constituent of the iridoid, is often bitter in flavor. Therefore, it is the carminative action of these plants. Also, these plants can be identified easily by its square stem. The first Lamiaceae plant we'll talk about is self-heal. Self-heal is a tubular two-lipped flower with a conical terminal spike at the end of the stem. It has hairy bracts, slightly aromatic opposite leaves, and the signature square stem. Self-heal is considered astringent, yet mucilaginous, so meaning it soothes the mucous membranes. It is a great wound healer. It is indicated for use in formula to help clear infections, move the lymph, decrease blood pressure, support pink eye as an eye wash, and has historically been used as a gargle in the mouth for inflammatory conditions. I personally like to dry it and then add it to calendula, plantain, and rose as a wound salve. The next plant is giant nettle leaf hyssop. This lovely abundant herb is used to soothe the digestive tracts, promote sweating, speed along cold and flus, calm the nerves. It is recommended to harvest this plant early while the flowers are in bloom and super duper fragrant. Its terpene and volatile content is what makes this plant a great antimicrobial herb. It is indicated for use in GI support issues such as sluggish bowels or damp digestion. Its flavonoid content makes it anti-inflammatory in nature, and it can be helpful in liver stagnation headaches, which are often characterized by pain behind the eyes and the back of the neck. It is also a gentle expectorant, which That combined with its aromatics makes it a lovely to dry and infuse into honey for sore throats and coughs. And the next herb is mountain mint. Sometimes this is referred to as coyote mint. It's identified by its woody base, unbranching square stems, ovate lance-shaped leaves, and gray-green to purple flowers. It is a perennial flowering plant that likes to grow in mountain forests and mountain meadows and near sagebrush scrub. It has a very minty odor characteristic of the mint family. And when the plants are in full flower with its most vibrant color, this is the best time to harvest the aerial parts by snipping the stalks just above the node of the lowest pair of leaves. It is recommended to tincture this plant fresh so as to capture its full aromatic constituents. However, it can also be dried on a screen or in a bag for tea. Both the tea and the tincture of this plant is helpful for gas and bloating and nausea. A hot tea or tincture added to hot water can also help break a fever. It can bring on delayed menses. Therefore, due to this uterine stimulating property, it should be avoided in pregnancy. According to the herbalist Scott Cluse, these plants are often considered slow growing. They often live in nutrient lacking soils. Therefore, you just want to harvest a few stems off of each plant. Next is the Apiaceae or carrot family. It's characterized by its tiny 5-part flowers situated in umbels. In general, sepals are small, scale-like with 5 or none. They have an inferior ovary and often the stems are hollow. They have compound alternate leaves, but you will see the leaf shape can vary. These plants are high in volatile oils, flavonoids, and carotenoids, but they are characterized by being antispasmodic, carminative, diaphoretic, antimicrobial, and anti-inflammatory, as well as anti-cancer. They have warming and pungent energetics. These are some of the variety of Apiaceae plants found in our bioregion. The first is a non-native Queen Anne's lace wild carrot. It can be identified as several hairy hollow stems growing from one central stem. I like to remember for hygiene, Queen Anne's lace has hairy legs and wears a skirt, which is referring to a whorl of bracts radiating around the stalk under the many flowered head. The fern-like basal leaves emerge from a white taproot that smells very similar to our culinary carrots. Often, a single purple flower will dot the center of a flower head. As the summer goes on, the flower head will round into a ball-shaped seed head. The root of this plant is very moistening, yet the seeds are very drying in energetic nature. The plant is known medicinally, historically, to be used for urinary tract infections, contraception, as well as a fertility tonic when used over time. The active constituents of this plant include the sesquiterpenes, the monoterpenes, which are primarily involved in the antimicrobial and antispasmodic actions, and the phenolics, which are the anti-inflammatory constituents, and coumarins. This is part of the contraceptive as well as bronchorelaxant properties. According to the herbalist Scott Cluse, there are a fair amount of cautions to be had when using this herb in the case of anything hormone related, and it is contraindicated for those who are pregnant. The next plant is Gray's lovage, sometimes referred to as Oshala. There is nothing more impressionable than the smell of this aromatic oily root of this plant. The base of the leaf stalk from a hairy crown from above the roots is said to be related to the Rocky Mountain analog Osha, which is at risk for being overharvested in commerce. The medicinal constituents of this plant have not been as thoroughly investigated as Osha. Historically, it has been used to relieve sore throats, support the lungs, speed recovery from viral illness. The medicinal resins of this plant are not soluble in water, therefore they're prepared with alcohol as a tincture or as a syrup. It has been called by some to be a bear medicine, as that its oily root is dug up by bears to be eaten in the spring as they wake up from hibernation. These two medicinal plants do have very dangerous toxic lookalikes, poison hemlock and water hemlock. Therefore, unless it is positively ID'd, just leave this family alone. Even myself, I take extreme caution when interacting with this plant family in the wild. The next Apiaceae plant we will talk about is Lyle's angelica, sometimes also referred to as sharp-tooth angelica. This plant has a hollow stem and is usually hairless with sometimes a purple stem. It can grow 3 to 6.5 feet tall and is attached to a thick, oily, pungent-smelling taproot. It has sharply toothed 3-parted leaves, further divided into opposite leaflets. This beautiful plant is often found near water, meadows, and damp forested slopes. A phrase that helps one distinguish between angelicas and water hemlock is veins to the tip, good for the lip, veins to the cut, bad for the gut. However, of course, this is not a definitive distinguishing plant characteristic, and this is not what you should identify these plants with to make sure they're safe. So on Mount Ashland, look for the open meadows with water seeps, and you'll find this plant. Medicinally, this plant is warming and drying to chronic damp conditions induced by lung infections. When taken as a tea or a tincture in the tea, it helps to break up and move stuck mucus. The bitter constituents of the seeds and the roots aid digestion, gassiness, nausea, and intestinal cramping. It not only supports stagnant conditions of the lungs and digestive system, but also delayed stagnant menstruation. The next medicinal plant we will talk about is cow parsnip. This also has oily roots that have been used to reduce digestive upset, support the nervous system, and clear congestion from the lungs. There are some reports of the seeds being used historically to aid in controlling pain for toothaches as well. This plant can be identified by its irregular toothed long leaves, its wide and hairy sheath stalks, and broad flat flowers. However, this plant has an extremely dangerous lookalike, the giant hogweed. This plant is known to grow up to 18 feet tall, and the sap from this plant can burn the skin and the eyes, even if one just barely brushes up against the plant. It can cause blistering and scarring for a very long time to come. It has a green and red or purple splotched stalk with white hairs. So again, if there's any question about identification whatsoever, best to leave this plant alone, or this plant family alone. So the other plants we are going to look at today don't fall neatly into a plant family category. However, we can group them into a type or genre of medicine. The plants on this slide are medicinal roots. As herbalists, we generally harvest roots in the fall after the foliage has died back and the energy of the plant is in the root. Although some herbalists feel it's best to harvest aromatic roots in the springtime before the plant sends up a flower. Wild ginger is an unassuming plant that decorates the forest floor. It is uniformly green with hairy long stalk and broad heart-shaped leaves, 2 per node, that attach directly to the rhizome. The seed appendage of this plant contains an oil that attracts ants, which disperse them. This plant is rich in terpenes, phenolic compounds, including gingerol, which is what gives the root its pungent flavor and scent. This is an evergreen plant, so in the spring and summer, there is a hidden reddish colored flower underneath the leaf, easy to miss. This root helps stimulate sweating, acute respiratory infection. It helps with acute respiratory infections and intestinal cramping and stimulates menstrual bleeding. Because of this, it is contraindicated for use with pregnancy and should not be used for long-term due to kidney irritation. The next plant on this is dock. Dock is a bitter astringent root that is incredibly helpful for digestive function, especially in cases of sluggish digestion and sluggish motility, stagnant bowel movements. It supports lymphatic function and is protective of the liver. Due to that function and its action as an alterative, it is great for use in eruptive skin issues like eczema or acne. It is rich in iron, which can assist those with anemia. I have used this in iron syrups, for example. It is a bitter tonic, which I often add to my bitter tincture formulas. And one of the main constituents, the anthraquinones, which are found in herbs like senna or cascara, which are often employed in cases of severe constipation. Yellow dock is effective, but much more gentle than these other herbs, which I believe to be, of course, more favorable. The next plant is lomatium, sometimes referred to as biscuit root. And I feel this plant is very quintessential to Southern Cascade medicinal herbs. It has compound leaves, mostly basal, and has divided oval-shaped leaflets that arise from a taproot. The umbel of flowers tends to flower in the spring to early summer. Lomatium seeds have historically been used for upper respiratory tract congestion due to their aromatic and antiviral properties. It is important to harvest sustainably from this very slow growing plant and take up the maximum a third of the seeds per plant, if that. This is a low dose plant, meaning we take the plant tincture in the form of drops. And some people might have an allergic reaction to this plant medicine, so we often pair it with some more liver supportive herbs that prevent that. The next plant is false Solomon seal, also sometimes referred to as false lily of the valley. This plant, it differs from its namesake Solomon seal as that the stalk produces flower above the plant that turns into bright red berries in the fall, whereas true Solomon seal has flowers and fruits that hang below the stalk. It has long, smooth leaves with parallel veins, and it works very similar to Solomon seal in that it nourishes and moistens the connective tissue by loosening the tendinous junctions around the joints. The soft tissue then has more motility or mobility. The steroidal saponins are believed to regulate hormones. Historically, it has been used as external wash to relieve itch from insect bites due to its anti-inflammatory nature. The next plant is Silka valerian, which is less medicinally researched valerian species, but has been used medicinally historically the same as valerian. Valeriana officinalis, and it shares its stinky root odor. Valerian is a strong muscle relaxer that has a sedative effect and often used in sleep formulas. Therefore, it should always be contraindicated with other sleep aids. According to the herbalist Scott Cluse, this herb both relaxes and sedates the nervous system, relieving muscle cramps, spasms, improving vision and brain function. However, although effective as a sleep aid, some people, a small percentage of people, might experience nightmares from this herb or the opposite effect. The next plant we're going to talk about is our beloved Oregon grape, which is found in the Berberdaceae family. The variety of species in Oregon can be used interchangeably medicinally. Oregon grape is an evergreen shrub with an upright height that can vary between 3 to 10 feet in the case of Berberis aquifolium, to 2 feet in height, Berberis nervosa, and to that of a ground cover, Berberis repens. Berberis aquifolium has alternate compound pinnate leaves with 7 to 11 glossy green leaflets that are ovate to ovate lanceolate with undulating margins and 10 to 20 spine teeth. In the springtime, it has small yellow flowers that bloom in terminal clusters. During midsummer, they produce dark purple berries that are often described as tiny sour grapes. Nervosa is also an evergreen shrub that can be considered more of a slow-growing ground cover. Its leaves are clustered at the stem tips and are pinnately compound and glossy green leaflets with more bristle tooth, and sometimes in the winter they can appear to have a purplish hue. This species also has small yellow flowers on elongated terminal clusters, blooming in the spring. The berries of this plant tend to be bluer in color with a waxy coat. Berberis repens is more of an evergreen shrub or ground cover that has dull blue-green leaves that are pinnately compounded with 3 to 7 broad spine-toothed leaflets that turn bronze or purple in color in the winter. The darker yellow flowers bloom on racemes in the spring, and the black colored fruit with has a blue bloom in the fall. Repent's leaves turn red in the fall, which is a reason for its Spanish name, herb of blood. Both Berberis aquifolium and Berberis nervosa prefer partial to full shade with moist, well-drained acidic soil, which is why it can often be found in the understory of conifers. However, Repent's prefers sun to partial sun. It does not require much moisture, making this species to be a great fit for a drought-resistant native plant garden. The energetic profile of Oregon grape root is both cooling and stimulating. It can be supportive of the gastrointestinal system as a digestive bitter tonic, a cholagogue, meaning it supporting the production and release of bile, and hepatic, which supports liver function. It is an alterative, meaning that it's very moving in nature and supportive of the body's processes of metabolism and elimination. Alterative herbs are helpful in cases of digestive disorders as they can assist in waste elimination without the harsh laxative effects. Alteratives can also assist in the assimilation of nutrients from our food in cases of malabsorption. Oregon grapefruit has an affinity for the skin. It is also an antimicrobial herb, often used topically. So another primary action is that it's astringent, meaning it tightens the cellular junctions. Astringent herbs have a binding action on the mucous membranes, skin, and other tissue that they encounter. They are drying and toning to the skin and mucous membranes, the primary medicinal constituent of berberine. This is found within the yellow color of the inside of the root bark. It has been shown that the activities of the isolated berberine are antispasmodic, sedative, hypotensive, antimicrobial, acting on a broad spectrum of bacteria, protozoa, and fungi in vitro. Berberine delays the small intestine transit time. It stimulates the body's bitter receptors. It stimulates bile production and secretion, and may increase the effectiveness of uptake of insulin receptors. Therefore, it is hypoglycemic and has been shown to have some antiviral activity as well. Oregon grapefruit also has a degree of flavonoid content. These flavonoids are the class of plant pigments that act as antioxidants in our body. So now we're going to talk about shrubs that have medicine. The first is ceanothus, sometimes referred to as redroot by herbalists as a general name that's used to describe multiple species of ceanothus, especially in the Pacific Northwest. The seeds of this plant are fire-dependent germinators. They are nitrogen fixers that help heal the soil after a fire. They're often found in full sun, drier areas. Medicinally, we use the root bark of this plant. The roots have nodules on them that like to remind herbalists of their signature function with the lymphatic system. The tannins in the root bark are astringent. Therefore, they tighten leaky tissues as a tissue tonic. However, the saponins restore fluid flow in the body. Therefore, the combination of these two constituents and their respective medicinal properties help with boggy stagnation in the body, such as edema, swelling, stuck mucus, or even a melancholy mood accompanied by poor digestion of fats. The next plant we commonly have is Sambucus mexicana, otherwise referred to as blue elderberry in this area. Elder is everyone's flu and cold hero. Therefore, it feels like it has been overharvested in some places in our mountains. I've watched stands of elder dwindle down to almost nothing, partially due to drought, but I feel like overharvesting with no tending to the plants has put strain on many of the elders in our mountains. Controversial, I know. Everyone I say this to that gets a little bit defensive and says, well, the elders I harvest from are really deep into the forest. I'm going to guess that they're not as remotely hidden as you think they might be. So it is easy to propagate. So buy starts from our native plant nurseries like Plant Oregon and Talent, and have elderberries to harvest for many years to come. The elder flower is great to add to teas to break a fever, and the berry is often taken in the form of a syrup to prevent or hasten a viral illness. During COVID, there was some well-intentioned misinformation put on the social media. People were saying that elderberry shouldn't be taken during COVID as it will create a cytokine storm. So maybe taking an immunostimulant isn't what you want at that moment, but it will not create a cytokine storm. It is a strong immune stimulant, therefore it should be used with caution with those people who have autoimmune conditions. When we prepare medicines from blue elderberry, it's important to wait to harvest until the berry is covered in a white wild yeast and harvested with the stems turning red. The leaves and stems should be completely removed from the medicine made. It is also important not to consume large quantities of the berry or berry juice, as it needs to be processed with some low heat. Otherwise, it can create some GI distress. This deciduous shrub can grow up to 4 meters high and has compound leaves with 5 to 9 leaflets. It will produce numerous white to yellow flowers on umbels. In the fall, it produces black to purple berry-like drupes. One of the main constituents of the flower is triterpenes. In the berries are the flavoglycosides, the vitamin C, also in large quantities, polysaccharides, and pectins. One clinical study showed that elderberry supplementation reduced cold duration and symptoms in air travelers. Another clinical trial in 2014 showed the effects of phenol, where other clinical studies have shown the efficacy and safety of oral elderberry extract in the treatment of influenza A and B virus infections. The next medicinal shrub we're going to talk about is big sagebrush. This is a woody perennial that is common throughout the western states, found in shrub steppe ecosystems, valleys, dry plains, meadows, and rocky slopes. We harvest the branching tips when it is in flower. We can identify it by its gray to brownish bark on solitary stems. It generally is 1 to 2 inches leaf. The leaf length is 1 to 2 inches long, are silver green, and remain on the plant throughout winter. The flower heads are made up of 3 to 6 tiny tubular flowers forming terminal clusters. It doesn't take much of this plant to make a strong medicine. Just a few ounces as a tea or a small dose of a tincture in a tea can help promote sweating to help the body kick an infection, clear congested lungs, or stimulant stagnant menses. Due to the camphor, it's the pungent, which is the pungent essential oil found in the leaves, and infused oil rubbed on the chest or inhaled steam of this plant can clear lung congestion in no time. A cold tea of this plant is said to stimulate digestion as well. However, due to its high volatile oil content, it's cautioned against long-term use or during periods of pregnancy. Brings us to the ephemeral plants of our mountainous region. The ephemeral plant is any short-lived plant, usually one that has 1 or more generations of growth only during favorable periods when there is enough moisture and passes through the unfavorable periods in the form of seeds. The first on the list that we see most in the most densely forested areas is Pipsissewa. Sometimes people refer to this plant as the Western Prince's Pine, but we will just call it Pipsissewa. This has changed a few times. It's part of the Ericaceae family, the heath family. This evergreen plant can be ID'd by its false whorl of 3 to 5 shiny green, sharply toothed lance-shaped leaves. The flower has a waxy appearance of a variety of pink hues with small concave petals. The fertile stems are generally erect and may have 2 to 15 flowers. Fruits are depressed and they persist throughout the winter. It produces both sexually and vegetatively, meaning it propagates itself both as a seed and by rhizome. So you'll always see it in at least a small patch where there are a few stems joined underneath the soil by a rhizome. You'll always see the flowers being pollinated by bumblebees or a type of beetle. It develops numerous minute seeds. Their dispersal mechanism has not been documented, and however, I generally see this under deep forested canopies. And if you're lucky to come across a large patch of this flower in bloom, usually here in July through August, depending on the elevation, you'll be greeted by a symphony of buzzing bumblebees feeding on the abundant nectar of this flower. This is a very slow-growing plant that requires care when harvesting. Pipsissewa is on the United Plant Savers watch list. This is a plant that could become at risk or threatened. So you never want to harvest the entire plant. It's just not necessary. And never harvest from a plant in seed or in flower. A more sustainable way to harvest from this plant is to harvest the upper whorl of leaves, and you dry them quickly to maintain its green color and medicinal value. Historically it's been used in root beer formulas, not as popular or abundantly as sassafras or sarsaparilla, but it has been in some of those old recipes. The wintergreen, the methyl salicylate constituent, gives it its wintergreen fragrance. It has been historically helpful for post-kidney infection and useful for contemporary herbalists to help both tone and heal from especially serious infections. Which is where herbs can be extremely useful to restore tissue integrity and function once an acute infection has been treated with antibiotics. It's often used with recurrent bladder infection, cases of STIs, or prostatitis. Its common active constituents include the naphthoquinones, the hydroquinones, polyphenols, salicylates, and triterpenes. So it has many functions, but its use is primarily used as an anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial action on the urinary system. The next plant on the list is Pacific Bleeding Heart, and it's named due to its shape of its unique flowers found in the understory of shady forests with rich soils. It's found in the poppy or the Papaversaceae family. It contains opiate-like alkaloids that numb and deaden pain and traumatic shock. The whole plant has been used as an analgesic. Therefore, it is considered a low-dose plant, meaning we take the smallest dose, sometimes in the form of drops. Then we come to one of my favorites, the violet. The purple violet, Viola adunca, and the yellow violet, Viola glabella. Violets are all 5-petaled flowers with a curved stalk. And if you look closely, there are these little cute lines on the bottom petal that guide bees to where they need to go for pollination. There have been more clinical studies on the medicinal effects of Viola adunca or Viola odorata or Viola tricolor, but not so much on Viola glabella. However, there are ethnobotanical reports of Native Americans using Viola glabella. The leaves and flowers of Viola glabella have been used to treat a variety of ailments, including colds, coughs, and sore throats. The violets are full of flavonoids, saponins, and salicylates. Therefore, they moisten, cool, and clear stagnation. They are used for dry asthma, bronchitis, and swollen glands. And in my practice, I will often include the aerial parts of this plant in teas, formulas for seasonal allergies. And then lastly on this slide is beautiful Trillium ovatum. I'll just start with this description by saying, don't harvest this plant. it would be at risk for overharvesting. These plants are so incredibly slow growing and long lived. Counting the leaf scars on a rhizome of this plant can reveal its true age. Only one true leaf will form in the plant's first 5 to 10 years of its life. It may take up to 15 years to give a flower. There it has been said that a plant that's a 3-inch rhizome might actually be over 70 years old. So just appreciate the beauty. To idea it's set of 3 petals, 3 sepals, and a whorl of 3 leaves. The leaves are full of astringent tannins that have historically been used for excessive bleeding and resolving excessive vaginal discharge. It does have a strong uterine stimulating property that poses certain cautions. I think a better analog for excessive bleeding would be yarrow. So there are some other medicinal flowering plants commonly found in our mountains, and this includes fireweed, which is a pioneer plant, meaning it's one of the first to colonize a burned or disturbed ecosystem. Pioneer plants grow rapidly and have traits that allow them to produce easily dispersed seeds. They improve the soils of a disturbed site, making it more suitable for other plant species to move in. As fireweed nourishes the soil, it does this as well for our tissue. Its interesting combination of tannins and flavonoids make it a great addition to a soothing tissue tonic. This can be applied to the reducing of inflammation of the intestines, especially in cases of diarrhea. An external wash or poultice of the leaves heals a variety of skin irritations as well. Goldenrod, a member of the Asteraceae family, is one of my favorite herbs for seasonal allergies and upper respiratory inflammation. However, its aromatic leaves and flowers also support the urinary tract and stimulate digestion. Clinical studies have investigated its antitussive properties, its antioxidant and antimicrobial properties, and its role as part of a formula to support reoccurring urinary tract infections, as well as in protocols to address an overgrowth of candida. The next plant, Pearly Everlasting, can be identified by its composite flower heads with dry, papery white bracts that overlap small yellowish flowers that is bunched together in terminal clusters atop an unbranched stem. They bloom in the late summer here, and they are often found in drier meadows, fields, disturbed areas, and along roadsides. The dried flower heads last intact for a really long time, and the flower can be harvested when in bloom, dried, and the flowers and leaves are then used as medicine. Its energetic profile is cooling and it's astringent. It has an affinity for the lungs and the GI. Therefore, as a tea, it can help reduce mucous membrane irritation and inflammation. This can be used as a mouth gargle, a mouthwash for mouth sores or sore throats. And to prevent overharvesting of this plant, please only take a few stalks from each plant. And lastly, parrot's beak, Pedicularis racemosa. This is such an interesting little flowering plant. It most often forms a hemiparasitic relationship to conifer trees. It has a woody base attached to the roots with little appendages called hastoria. The hastoria penetrate the roots of other plants around it to get nutrients. Because of this, identification of other plants around it need to happen with a lot of care, as that it can tap into and take up the toxic constituents from toxic plants, particularly monkshood, tansy ragworts, or some lupines. Its tulip flowers with leaf-like bracts are often in bloom in the late summer. It is related to Pedicularis densiflora, which I personally use more in my clinical practice and is more readily available in commerce. Both of these plants have constituents to relax the skeletal muscles and relieve pain from muscle spasm and overexertion. I have used this dried, infused into oil in my massage therapy practice to help encourage tight muscle tension to ease. I now have a few of my most favorite local medicinal plants that have not yet fit into an easy category or in this class. The first is plantain, Plantago lanceolata. This herbaceous plant grows all over and is so unassuming yet provides great medicine readily at our fingertips. Plantain is a very dark green, slender perennial growing much taller than Plantago major. Its leaf blades rarely reach an inch in breadth and are 3 to 5 ribbed, gradually narrowed into petioles, which are often more than a foot long. The flower stalks are often more than 2 feet long. It has the same chemical constituents as Plantago major. When this plantain grows amongst the tall grasses of a meadow, its leaves are longer and more erect. And when we find it by the roadside on dry soil, it's much smaller. The leaves are often slightly hairy and have a silvery appearance. And the flower stalks are longer than the leaves, furrowed and angular, and thrown boldly up into the air. The flower head varies a good deal in size and form, and sometimes being much smaller and more globular than others. The sepals are brown and paper-like in texture and give the head its peculiar rusty look. The primary actions of its leaves are anti-inflammatory, immunomodulant, vulnerary, or wound healing. And it has a demulcent quality, meaning soothing and nourishing and moistening to the tissues and mucous membranes. I personally use this. I'm a beekeeper, and if I get stung by a bee, I can quickly find a few leaves of plantain, chew them up, and place them on the sting as a poultice. And it will draw out the venom, and then it will treat the inflamed tissue and prevent healing and prevent swelling and itching of that site. I've often used the dry herbs and then added them to calendula and self-heal, comfrey, or rose to make a lovely infused oil to be used as a wound healing salve. Next is usnea. Usnea is not a plant, but it is a lichen. And usneas grow on tree branches and are characterized by the greenish gray elastic central cord, which you can see on moistened usneas if you pull both ends. If there isn't a central cord, then you might have a similar looking lichen that isn't usnea. It grows on hardwood, conifer, and hardwood forests. They're very slow growing. They do not readily reproduce. Although it might seem like they are abundant in our forests here, they are becoming more scarce in some places due to air pollution. It is said that they are air filters of the forest. So if collected, it's best not to harvest from the tree branches, but gather pieces that have fallen to the ground from the wind. It is said to be cooling and drying and heals the respiratory, urinary, and reproductive tract infections. It has been used in treating gram-positive bacteria such as strep or staph, and it has been used as an antiviral agent for herpes and Epstein-Barr. I personally have used this herb to also support one's body during an active COVID infection. The tincture can be added to water to speed the healing of a staph infection, and the powdered thallus can speed wound healing. Medicine made from this thallus of usnea, and it's a different process involving a few more steps in tincture making due to the hardy cell walls of the thallus. The last plant on this slide is mugwort. And I believe mugwort to be a very magical plant that is very close to my heart. The parts of this plant that are used are the flowering tops and leaves, but I prefer to use this plant before the flowers open as to avoid potential pollen allergies. There is a lot of diversity phenotypically with mugwort, but it's characterized by bright green alternate serrate hairless leaves that have a white underside and bitter taste and milder smell. The energetic profile of this plant is warming, moving, and drying. It is anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic, a circulation stimulant, and protective to the liver, and is hypolipidemic, meaning it helps regulate liver function. The liver support of this plant can mostly be due to the sesquiterpene lactones. It is indicated for folks who are stuck, sluggish, and need some oomph. One of my herbal teachers of this plant, Larkin Bruce, described mugwort as depression, as used for depression, anxiety, mood disorders, stuckness. For someone who is feeling vulnerable and needs protection, like they can't see their dreams anymore and need guidance. Maybe it's a mother, a parent, or a caregiver who needs to be held while keeping on the path of healing. Mugwort can be a plant to lead us through the forest, to keep us moving forward, or at least stay with the challenge and the darkness. It's indicated for transformation of life to death, letting go of the old. It's for big archetypal challenging types, strong changes, the dark of night of the soul, when we need the light during a dark time. For existential crises, questions of why we are here, what is our purpose, how do we move forward, crises of identity. When we want and need a guide in our next steps, relationships. It's a strong and tender plant that allows us to experience the full complexity of who we are. I just love that explanation. Other uses of mugwort have been for dream enhancement. I use it in bug spray, and it's often used in a burn bundle to clear space. There are some cautions to consider with this plant, particularly with pregnancy and Asteraceae allergies. It is potent, so a little goes a long way. And I encourage you perhaps to just sit amongst the mugwort, smell its aroma, and build a relationship with it in that way. So we have mostly been talking about native plants to Southern Oregon bioregion, although a few non-natives have slipped into the discussion as well. I like to talk about the ethics of harvesting and wildcrafting when I bring in the discussion of medicinal non-native plants. I personally wildcraft very little of native plants. I prefer to let them flourish and have a chance to expand in their niche. If I do harvest them, I take only the smallest amount for personal need with a clear intention and always sit with the plant and ask permission and give gratitude. If there's any sense I should not harvest from that stand, I listen to this and move along. We do have some non-native plants in our bioregion that also have medicinal value. I personally feel more encouraged to make medicine from these plants, such as dandelion root. It is an amazing liver and GI support herb. The flowering tops of red clover. It's a great nourishing herb that is supportive of the female hormone system and nourishing the nervous system, and is a great alternative, which alkalizes the blood, moves waste products, aids in nutrient assimilation, amongst other things. We've all heard of the popular use of the aerial parts of St. John's wort used in treatment of depression, but I also prefer to use it as an anti-inflammatory herb specific to the nervous system. Blackberry is considered a noxious weed in our mountains, but very astringent leaves and the root moves mucus, dry tissue, and stops bleeding. A decoction of the tea of the root has traditionally been used to tone the intestines and assist with cases of severe diarrhea, and it also can be a great external wash for hemorrhoids. And lastly, mullein. We are familiar in the Pacific Northwest to mullein due to the forest fire smoky season. Mullein leaves are cooling, moistening to lung tissue, and act as a great expectorant for irritating coughs. The flower has traditionally been infused with garlic into an oil to assist with earache pain. And the root has traditionally been used as an astringent pain reliever for backaches and nerve pain. Okay, and so those are all the plants that I plan on talking about. Here is there's going to be two lists. So here's a list of some of the plants. So feel free to take a moment and make a screenshot of this list for further reference. And here is the second list of the plants that we've talked about today for further reference. And here is a list of resources. This is the conclusion of our virtual plant walk today. I've included a slide here with the resources for you to further explore topics. Feel free to come back to the slide or pause and take a screenshot for future reference. So I'd also like to say, just Please respect the land found around our mountains and know the regulations and policies governing harvesting in national monuments or national forested areas. It's always advisable to check with the relevant authorities before harvesting in these areas. The Eugene, Oregon herbalist Howie Bernstein cautions against harboring feelings of plant lust. By this, he means you are new. If you're new to herbal medicine or not new to herbal medicine, you might be excited about collecting plants from the wild. Please do so with purpose and intention and respect for that plant and its role it plays in the ecosystem. Also, in the spirit of the honorable harvest described by Robin Wall Kimmerer in her words, always ask permission for the ones whose lives you seek and abide by the answer. We are so lucky to live in such a magnificent place of abundant biodiversity, resource, and beauty. I hope this class has sparked some new appreciation and curiosity into the wild world of medicinal plants of the Klamath, Siskiyou, and Southern Cascade Mountains. I encourage you to go out and meet some of these plants in person and then watch them throughout the seasons and see how they change and how they relate to their habitat, build a relationship and tend to that relationship. Go on a hike, not just for exercise or to enjoy the nice view, but to introduce yourself to the land that you live on and slow down enough to listen to the teaching that the land has to offer. I'd like to close this class with another poem, this time from one of my current favorite books, the Cascadia Field Guide. It is a poem about the messages of beauty and strength in the face of adversity that we can all learn from trees. And it's called Lessons from a Tree by Kim Stafford. Lessons from a Tree. Seed split, root sprout, leaf bud, delve deep. Hold fast, reach far. Sway, lean, bow, loom. Climb high, stand tall, last long. Grow, thicken, billow, shade, sow seed. Rise by pluck, child of luck, lightning struck survivor. Burn, bleed, heal, remember, testify. Nest, host, guard, honor. Fall, settle, slump, surrender, offer, enrich. Be deaf, enough. Thank you.